Hey guys, Jeff at Huey's Garage, and we're going to get back on this 650 double pumper. Well, going to go ahead and start with the carburetor, and I've got a trick kit here, and we'll see if we can lumber through this because dealing with a little bit of an injury. I got some stitches in my finger, so not real fun, but let me show you what I got going on here. We got the Holley 650 double pumper is out of the carb cleaner. It's been soaked and it's been cleaned and rinsed off, and everything's been blown out real good. It's all ready to go. We've got a Holley trick kit, which is this is the part number for the typical double pumper Holley. It's got a lot of parts in it, so we'll go ahead and crack this one open here and start pulling out the gaskets that we need. These kits come with a lot of parts in them. Okay, the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to check the carburetor to make sure that everything is flat, that there's no warpage. So we'll check the bottom of the base of the carburetor here. We'll check the main body of the carburetor. I don't expect there's any problems. I mean, obviously we've not had a car fire or carb fire. I know that all the hardware is pretty original and pretty you know, nothing's chewed up like this thing's been apart a million times or been tweaked on. So this was a great core to buy and to rebuild. So but we're going to go ahead and check to make sure that everything's square, and I've got a small handheld straight edge that we'll go ahead and use for that. You basically just want to run it over the surfaces and see if there's any daylight, see if there's anything that doesn't quite look right. Run it corner to corner, and you know, hold it up to the light. See if you could see anything. I know I've checked this one pretty thorough, and it was looking really good. And the same thing for the carburetor body, the body of the carb, same way. You know, there's no daylight, there's no warpage. Everything looks real good, and again, this was a really good core to have. But we're going to go ahead and start separating our gaskets. So we got the power valves out, we got the needle and seats out. I know this carburetor, some of the carburetors have a 50cc secondary pump. This one has two 30cc's, a 30cc on the primary and 30cc on the secondary. We got the metering block gaskets, the bowl gaskets, and that brings up a good point here that it's a good idea to keep all of your old gaskets, because you'll see here the base to the base plate to carb body gasket. They come with 4 different gaskets, and I want to make sure that I use the right one. I don't want to have one that overlaps into the port, and I don't want to have one that sits back into the port. You know, anything that would cause turbulence through the ventures, it's not something I want. So luckily we have the original gasket here, so we will match the gasket and go from that, because I know this carburetor has not been taken apart before. It's a pretty virgin carburetor. I'm going to start with the base plate assembly, and we're going to go ahead and try to match up this gasket. So I do notice that some of the new gaskets have a real thin wall between the venturies. Here's one that's real thick, so I'm going to say that's probably not one of them. Here's one that's real thin. You could see the difference there, so we're going to probably say that's not one of them. Here's another one that's real thick, so I'm going to say that's probably not one. Here's one that's just about right. Yeah, so let's line that up and look at it. This looks like our gasket, so let's go ahead and start with this one. One thing nice about these Holleys is they have roll pins on the ends. Basically, it's a locating pin, and that allows you to make sure that you get everything lined up properly. So, all right, let's put the base together, and we'll go ahead and take the carb body, and again, everything's been cleaned and taken apart and blown out real good. So we want to make sure we get it on the right direction. So obviously our vacuum port is the one that's pointing to the rear, and the choke assembly is in the front. So that's how it's going to go. The choke's going to be in the front. Your vacuum port will be in the rear. Got the carb body and the carb base flipped over. We'll go ahead and start the screws. Let's go ahead and take those two that I took out of the double pumper, and we'll go ahead and start. Total of 8 screws here, base plate screws. Okay, we've got our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the 2 inboard 7 and 8. Okay, got the screws in, they're snugged down, and we're just going to go ahead and open up the throttle pumps and just check to make sure that the gasket didn't move around. Again, the gasket looks real good. It comes out flush with the venturi. It's not sticking into the hole. It's not receded back in the hole. So that was, again, the correct gasket put in the correct spot. Next thing to do is we're going to go ahead and set up our metering blocks. And just FYI, the primary or the front metering block on these double pumpers, it's the one that has the power valve. So you'll see it has a hole there. It's threaded. It's all set up for the power valve. It also has the threads on the sides for the idle circuit or the idle screws. All of that goes on there. It also has a port for a vacuum port, which is a brass fitting that goes into that. And on the secondary metering plate, it does not have the hole. It does not have the threads for the vacuum port, nor does it have threads for idle circuit screws. So that's kind of a way you could tell the difference. And we'll go ahead and set these up. Basically, the primary metering block will hold the idle or the power valve. It'll hold the idle screws, and it'll also hold the primary jets. The secondary metering block primary function is just to hold the secondary jets. So one of the items that I have noticed about these Holleys is when you go through and do the CFM calculator for your engine, if you get the right engine size and application for the correct carburetor and get the correct CFM carburetor, these carbs from the factory, preset from the factory, they are really close. So what I like to do is notice the baseline of a brand new carburetor or a carburetor that's never been taken apart in this case, and note what was inside of them. I know the 600 double pumper, when we bought this carburetor brand new 40 some odd years ago, I can tell you that I remember that the primary jets were 66 and the secondary jets were 76. 10 CFM or 10 size difference from the primaries to the secondaries, and that's because the power valve has a total value of 10 points. So in theory, when you're on the gas pedal real hard, when you're accelerating, you've got a 66 jet plus a 10 on the power valve, and then you've got a 76 on the rear. In theory, you've got a 76 jet on all 4 corners in each barrel. So that's kind of what I aim for. This carburetor, when I took it apart, I did notice that the primaries were 66s. I'm sorry, the primaries were 67s, and you can see that number on the side of the jet. I don't know how well you could see that. I did notice that instead of 66, they were 67, and the rears were 76. So, you know, it's close enough. I don't really want to go back to 66s, so we're going to go ahead and just do the 76s. And you know, I could tear through my Holley box and find another pair of 66s to put on the primaries, but I'm just going to go ahead and leave these in. And I don't think it's going to, one jet size is going to make too much of a difference. If it does, we'll go from there. Starting on the primary metering block, we're going to take our 67 jets and we're going to go ahead and put those in. Again, everything's been cleaned. We blew out all the dust because the carburetor had been sitting here on the bench for a couple of days, and just wanted to make sure everything was all nice and clean. Now we'll go ahead and snug these. The other thing we need to do is we need to put the bowl extension back. I think this is just something to do with slosh. I can't remember exactly. Again, it's been some time since I've done one, but I do have the serrated rivet here that holds this in. And so I got the bowl extension put back into place. The pin, the guide pin, the serrated guide pin is in. Now we need to get the idle screws for the idle circuit back in. I got to take these, get the gaskets out for that. There's some special gaskets that the idle screws fit in, and see if we can dig these out. It's basically a thick cork gasket. There's one right there, and we need one for each side for a total of 2. And then we'll need our idle circuit screws. Okay, so what'll happen is these will fit down inside the idle circuit holes, and then we'll put the idle screw in there. So I've got one side here situated. It's all run all the way down to the bottom, and I don't know what it is about idle set screws or idle circuits, but it seems like everything out there, I mean even down to lawnmowers, 1.5 turns out has always been a good baseline. So let's come out 1/2 turn, 1, 1.5. Okay, so we've got that preset to 1.5 turns out. We'll do the other side, and then we'll get ready to put the bowls back together. Okay, so now that we got the vacuum fitting in, the brass fitting for the vacuum put in, we'll set up the secondary metering block, which we've got our 76 jets. I'm not sure if you could see that there, but we'll go ahead and thread those down and tighten those. And again, checking 76. I want to make sure we didn't cross those up. So we'll go back to what it had when took the carburetor apart. And we'll snug these down. Doing this one-handed again, or half of a hand. Okay, so the metering blocks are ready to go. Now what we need to do is we need to set up the bowls, which means we'll have to put the floats back in, as well as the needle and seat assemblies. Okay, for the needle, or for the float assemblies, we need the long skinny screws that are left over. These other ones that are a little bit thicker in diameter are actually for the throttle pumps cover plates. So let's go ahead and thread these back in. We're going to start with the floats first. We'll go ahead and start the threading these. And the reason we wanted to start with the floats first is because we didn't want to put the needle and seat in and potentially risk bottoming those out or damaging the float. First, the O-rings, good. These were brand new, sealed up in the box. I like to run these down to about where they're flush. Let's see. Sometimes you have to push past the O-ring with these. Okay, so now it's stopping about at that point. So let's back it off. Actually, we'll keep it right where it was at. So it's bottoming out right about there. Okay, now let's get the gaskets. Now, to finish off the needle and seat, you need the adjuster nuts, which are these two, and then the top screws, and then you need the gaskets. These are the base gaskets, so we'll go ahead and put one around the brass needle and seat assembly. We'll go ahead and put the adjuster nut there, and then we will get the thicker gasket that will be the gasket for the screw. itself. All right, so we've got our float preset and we've got the assembly in place. We'll go ahead and snug that up in a bit, but we are going to be doing an adjustment with that once we get the carburetor running. Now that the floats are installed and they are preset by eyesight, and we've got the adjusting nuts and screws in place, the next thing we have to do is do the float bowl set screw or plugs, and each bowl has one, so you can actually adjust the floats, and we'll look at that later. But it requires a gasket for these covers or these plugs, screw plugs, basically like an aluminum gasket. So I like to put the rounded edge of this aluminum type gasket against the bowl, and then take the plug and go ahead and thread those onto the side. The next step will be to install the throttle pump assemblies for the primary and the secondary. These are the covers. You can see these are the 30cc covers. If it were a 50cc cover, the bowl or the rounded portion of it would be a lot deeper. It would match this gasket. But these are 30cc's, and that's what they look like. So we've got the hardware here. Let's go ahead and install these. Okay, as you can see here, I've got one of the 30cc throttle pumps pre-assembled, and I've got the parts for the second one because they're both the same. So one of the issues is that you could see that there's a recess in this hole here, as well as there's a recess in the diaphragm gasket. That in itself creates the 30cc shot of liquid, in this case gasoline, that you have that's an instant shot into the venturis. So the spring goes in there to basically have the diaphragm gasket keep its form, as well as having the rebound ability to draw fuel back in and refill quickly. So we've got the screws in place here. We'll go ahead and thread them, and we'll tighten that up. Okay, throttle pumps are in place. They're snugged down. The springs are installed in the diaphragm. The diaphragm is up, which is what you want because it will change the geometry of where the arm is. But you can see with the spring in there and the diaphragm being held up by that spring, it gives you that quick rebound that you need. Anyway, we're all set here. Got our float plug installed, our float, got the adjustment on the needle and seat adjusted, and we've got our metering blocks ready to go. We just have one more item we need to do, and that's to put the squirters on, and that requires these little needles here that go down inside this underneath the squirter, as well as the special screws that come with it. On the 650 double pumper, both of the squirters are 28s. Those are what came from the factory with this carburetor. So we'll go with that for now. We'll see how that works, and because those should be the factory installed squirters, and if we have any issues with bogging, maybe we'll try that, as well as making sure that the throttle pumps don't have any lag in them when they're adjusted. Okay, on the pump nozzles, or the squirters, the 228s, we've got the needle that goes down inside the hole. You've got the squirter itself, and then the screws that hold it in place. Now the old gaskets, these two flat ones were the ones that went under the squirters, and then the ones that are at a 45-degree angle obviously form to the screws. The ones in the kits are, I didn't find any paper ones. They're more of that metallic, or more of an aluminum type material that was like the one that was used for the bowl plug gasket. So this is the only one that's in the kit, so I'm assuming this is an upgraded material, so we'll go ahead and use those and see how that goes. Okay, we'll go ahead and do the secondary first, just because it's easier to access. So here's the hole right there for the squirter, and you've got this needle that goes down in there. So we're going to go ahead and drop that down there with the sharp end down, of course. And now we're going to put the gasket on top, and being that these are both 28s, it won't matter, but we want to make sure that the discharge is down inside the each venturi on the secondaries, and then the gasket will need to go, or the washer will have to go on here, and then we'll thread this into place. And it's got a little locking point on the back that doesn't allow the squirter to turn or to get out of place. Okay, now even though I was a little concerned about these gasket materials, it snugs down real nice and formed into place. So we'll go ahead and do the primary one, which is down in here, and we'll get ready to put the bowls on it afterwards. Okay, this is a real fun one to get down into, so I like to I'll just show you this, but I typically just get a real long pair of needle nose pliers and go ahead and drop it down in there, and there it goes. It's down inside the hole. Okay, so this one's a little bit more difficult, but you can, especially with the choke in place, but you can go ahead and slide the gasket in from behind the choke plate and just make sure that the gasket is in place right there. So I don't know how well you could see that there, but so we'll go ahead and preset the squirter with the gasket and the screw in place, and then what we'll do is we'll do the same thing and we'll use the pliers. So we're ready to put the bowls and the metering blocks back onto the body of the carburetor. One thing I always want to make sure that I do is check to make sure that I've got all the gasket material off of the bolt. You can see this one still has a little bit of the paper because they are these like paper, kind of thick paper gaskets. However, the latest kit, the gaskets that come with on the bowl screws are, it's kind of like a harder rubber neoprene. So here's 4 more of them. It's kind of blocked by the post, but these are what now go on the screws instead of these paper ones that shred and come into pieces when you take them off. So this must be an updated version. I'm sure that they work a lot better. The other issue is you definitely want to save your old gaskets, because just like in the pictures, there are gaskets out there that are like this that has the power valve cutout, and this carburetor did not have one of those gaskets, and honestly it didn't really matter anyway because the 2 gaskets that came with it were exactly like the originals. So just stuff to look out for, and it's a good reason why you want to save your gaskets when you're putting it back together. Okay. Oh, and one other item, we have not done it yet. We have not put the power valve into the primary metering block. And the reason for that is because we don't really know what we're going to want to put in the car. So 2 trains of thought over the years that I've dealt with. The first one, and this is back when I was drag racing, what we used to do is we used to get a basic vacuum reading where we'd get our idle circuits adjusted out as best we could, and then we would get a vacuum reading with the vacuum gauge. And if I remember right, this original carburetor that was in this 55, the 600 double pumper, it had 11.5 inches of vacuum. So what I did, and this is what I was told, was go 2 points below that reading, and I was assuming that's for when I was drag racing, because I primarily drag raced the car. So if I had 11.5 of vacuum on that carburetor with my vacuum gauge, I would put a 9.5 power valve in it. Now I do remember that preset from the factory, they came with a much lower number. In fact, they came with a 6.5, which would probably explain why of the 3 power valves that I got in the kit, 2 of them are a 6.5 and 1 is a 10.5. And I've got other power valves in my Holley box, but I'm not going to put a 10.5 in this because there's just no way. That's only 1 point back from the day of when I had the best vacuum reading on this car. The other school of thought, more recent, something that I've heard, and this is, I would assume, is for a street car, is to go half of your vacuum reading. So if you have a 13 inches of mercury that your vacuum gauge is pulling, half of that would be a 6.5. So being that I have 2 6.5s here, I'm just going to go ahead and put that in because I'm definitely not going to put a 10.5 in. I've got the gasket for the power valve that'll go on, and we'll go ahead and we'll thread that on to the primary metering block right now. Okay, so, and you'll have to line the gasket up. This probably isn't the best way to do this, but with half a hand, this is about the best I could do. Okay, now the gasket looks like it's centered, and we'll go ahead and snug that down. It takes a 1-inch end wrench, and I went ahead and snugged that down. The gasket's centered, and we've got a 6.5 power valve in. So let's go ahead and put this together. So just a quick side note, I was noticing the metering block gaskets, you could see how stretched they are, where they've dried up and actually shriveled away, actually pulling away and actually cracking. So that's not good. That's definitely, I think, probably why they went to this newer type material, but it's definitely good to make sure that you check the gasket and make sure that you got it on the right way, because it is different flipping the gaskets one side versus the other. Okay, as far as the metering block gasket, it has 2 ways that it could go on, but you'll see quickly why it'll only go on one way, and that's because the metering block has a locating pin right there, and that locating pin, if the metering block is put in the correct position, can only go on one way. So here's our primary metering block. There's the locating pin. We'll go ahead and set this in place, and you can see how it sets into place. Now we'll get the bowl gasket, which these also have locating pins down at the base and at the top to hold it into place. Then we get our bowl, which I know this is the primary bowl because it used to have the Holley sticker on it, and you could still see the goo from that. And okay, so now go ahead and screw it in, everything into place. Got our gaskets on each of the bowl screws, the new style rubber. Do all these to get them started. Oh, one of the other issues that we need to make sure we do that I didn't was to make sure that the throttle pump and the throttle pump cam, everything aligns there. So now we could tighten down. Okay, so the 650 double pumper is done. I've been through it with a fine-tooth comb and basically gone over each and every screw, made sure that everything's snug. You know, and that's snug to me just means a feel for it. You know, you're not going to obviously put a battery-powered screwdriver or electric drill to put this together. You're basically, you know, you're doing everything by feel. So that just means going down and snugging everything down, making sure that the gaskets seat and crush to the right level, not over torqued, but enough that everything seals up. But everything is pre-adjusted on this thing. The only thing that I have left to do is I have to take the carb inlet ports, because I do have a certain carb inlet that I use, and these are two of the pieces off of it, so I need those inlets off of the 600 here to go on this. I also wanted to, well, we'll just do this right now. Oh, wow. That's not good. We'll just do this right now, and that is, we're going to put the plug on the vacuum port. Now that's probably where I end up getting my vacuum reading on my vacuum gauge, but we want to make sure that we don't put this thing on without this, because that could cause a whole bunch of problems, especially if we forget about it. So the other item that we're going to do is we're going to do exactly what's been done to this one right here. I don't know if you could see the manual choke, but we've got some baling wire that is locking the choke into the open position. Now, ask me how I know that I need to do that. And if you don't, then I'll tell you. But I'm going to do the same thing to this carburetor, and the reason is that I did have a time at the drags. I was at Bakersfield, and I remember I did a pretty good hard launch off the line, and for some reason the choke slammed shut. I can't remember if it was after a burnout or what happened, but all of a sudden the car got real fat, it blubbered a bunch of times, and it basically shut off. So what we will do is we will go ahead and we'll make sure that the linkage stays closed on this. We'll use the baling wire and we'll lock out the choke. I don't want to take it apart or take the valve out or take the butterfly out. I'm just going to go ahead and lock it out like I did this one. It'll just be a lot easier. And I mean, hey, it's California. I don't think in the whole time that I've owned this car, I've ever had to use the choke on it. Maybe to start it up when it's when the carb's new, but I will lock out the choke so that that never happens again. As far as everything goes, we're all set. We just need to mount it on the intake, and then we'll fill the bowls up. We'll fire it up, and then we'll adjust the float bowls and the idle, and then we should be ready to go out and flog it. Okay, got the carburetor in. It's all torqued down. Throttle linkage works great. Forgot I had to bend a portion of the flat on the throttle linkage because it hits my my adjustable throttle linkage bar. But yeah, she's all ready to go, and we should be ready to fire it up. Well, dome light works. Clock is working. So I put a little bit of fuel in it. I also put some ATF in it because I know that when this thing sat for a long time, it leaked out of the dipstick tube. It's kind of typical on the Turbo 400s, especially if they've been sitting for a long time. The dipstick seal is not the greatest, and it basically filled up a drip pan and then some. So, all right, I think I got the bowls filled enough to where the throttle pumps will work. So let's give it a shot. We've been cranking on it, and we've built some oil pressure. I've got the fuel line inlet disconnected just to make sure that there's not any bad fuel in it. I'm pretty sure the tank's dry, but we just want to see here. So I've primed it, and let's see if we can get the fuel pump to spit some fuel. One more time here. Okay, well, I would say that's probably long enough to make sure that the fuel pump's working. And I don't know what's going on with that, so